Hi everyone, I'm Anthony O'Flynn. Today I went to an event on the Sunshine Coast where Malcolm Roberts was speaking. If you haven't heard of Malcolm Roberts before, he is a Queensland senator in the federal parliament and his party is One Nation. And he is one of the few Australian politicians who are speaking out against all the issues we've seen unfold in the last few years. And in today's presentation, he covered a range of topics regarding everything from the magic potion to the reducing of our sovereignty to organisations such as the UN, WHO, interference in Australian sovereignty by other organisations such as WEF and all the other bad actors who are involved in basically creating this global government with diminished state sovereignty, which is something that we don't want, and we still here in Australia need to go through this experience of actually growing up and this rite of passage to actually come to terms with the fact that this implication of unelected bodies on our country, on our nation, is not for our benefit. Interestingly, he actually said that Pauline Hanson has been speaking out against Agenda 21 since 1996. And so we are having this overall general characteristic in the awakening community of denigrating and criticising all politicians and not basically having any confidence in the system whatsoever, not having any confidence in any politicians whatsoever. But if you actually go and have a look on social media at some of the clips and the views that Malcolm Roberts is actually communicating to the public, he's actually very aware of the various challenges, social, economic, political, environmental challenges that we're facing. Today he was giving a lot of information about the dangers of the magic potion and also the manufacturers as to their contribution to the basic issues that are now facing all over the world, the people who have taken this. And it was very, very clear from his presentation some of the issues that people are going to be facing and already are facing in regard to this. This isn't really the point of my video though. I wanted to make this video after actually being in person and listening to this politician speaking, and it's becoming evident that there's people who are in positions of power, who do have influence, who are basically part of the system. They're actually coming to the conclusion that they are basically being lied to as well, and they're actually on their own awakening journey. And all too often in the awakening community, we are not giving anyone a chance to grow and transform. And this is to the detriment of the overall movement and to humanity in total, because we're not basically seeing that each soul has a role to play in this, whether they choose not to participate even, it's still a role. And if we're not allowing people who are basically shaping public policy, who are having a much broader voice than many people who don't have a large following or aren't part of the system per se, then we're completely doomed to turn this around. And this is a very, very pessimistic attitude that is often a projection by many people of their own negativity, their own frustration, their own darkness, that they're not seeing the light in others. And there's good and evil in all people. Well, let's face it, some people are just pure evil, but we do know that for the majority of the population, there's good and evil, and people are having their own inner struggle as they're going through this. It's just that some of them, it's much more public. Now, I'm not defending the system. I'm not defending politicians per se. There will always be gatekeepers. In fact, some of the biggest gatekeepers of information of all have the biggest followings in the alternative media by far, who are limiting the content that they're producing and limiting access to deeper elements of knowledge and this sort of thing. There are gatekeepers, there are shills, there are people who are totally delusional, there are people who are paid agents, there are psyops, there are all these things going on. Yes, absolutely. But there are also people who are part of the system who are coming to recognize just how broken, how manipulated this system is, how these corporations such as BlackRock and Vanguard are dominating various industries and having their own agendas that are not only economic, that are actually part of social engineering. And so it's becoming evident that there are cracks appearing in the system because people in the system itself are starting to question what's going on. And so while we need to be vigilant and have discernment, there are people who are genuinely starting to want to be of service, want to get the truth out there, want to get the message out there. And they're actually very publicly starting to dissent from the consensus reality, from the agenda. And of course, the other really big name that's been in the media a lot lately is Tucker Carlson, who is basically having a very strong voice and a very big voice of his concerns around a whole range of issues that are very relevant over the last 3 years and going forward across the spectrum of various social, political, economic issues. And to give you an example of how influential he actually is, well, he made a recent video after his departure from Fox News, which I saw had recently, I don't know what it's at now, but it had recently gone over 40 million views on his channel on Twitter. When he was on Fox, he was getting about 3 million viewers a night. So his influence is colossal. And if we're not prepared to see the good in people, and again, I reiterate, I'm not saying that we shouldn't have discernment and just trust people blindly, but this awakening is much bigger than people's little echo chambers, people's little followings on social media, people's little, sort of diatribe type, small closed communities. This thing is going to go much, much bigger. And in order to do that, there are going to be people who start to see that there is something wrong. And this will begin on perhaps one medical issue and then expand into a whole range of different topics. Tucker Carlson, for example, has been quite vocal on the existence and the confirmation of the existence of UFOs. So, and his wide-ranging influence and his credentials and his fact that he is part of the system actually gives him more credibility to influence the mainstream. And that's really what the awakening is about, is to actually shift the needle of the mainstream. It doesn't have to be shifted at 180 degrees. Even a minor shift of, as an analogy of 5 to 10 degrees will produce colossal effects across tens and hundreds of millions of people around the planet. So that was really my big takeaway from this event that I was at today. And other people will come forward who are part of the system, who have influence, who can create change, and are starting to speak out. If you're looking for someone who's perfect, you're not going to find that in anyone. If you're looking for someone that hasn't made mistakes, you're not going to find that in anyone. Yes, you can go back and look at people's voting histories and see that they are flawed and they have, at least in my view, made the incorrect decision on how to vote on certain bills. But if you're going to put people in the category that they're just doomed forever, then you're not giving anyone the opportunity to change. You're not giving anyone the opportunity to evolve. And this is the time that we're in. And this is the time that we're in. We're in this compressed evolutionary period where people will start to come out of the woodwork and have a conscience and feel they have a responsibility and have a deeper soul calling to actually start to speak the truth about what's going on. This won't be for everyone, because a lot of people are complete cowards and they are part of the system. They don't want to disrupt the status quo and all this sort of thing. That's to be expected as well. But expect and at least give people a go who are trying to get the message out and trying to start to break through this mass collective hypnosis, this mass formation psychosis, this complete collective insanity which we've seen over the last few years, which, by the way, is far from over. In fact, for many people who have taken the magic potion and everything, it's only really just beginning. But that's another topic altogether. And the other thing I wanted to say is my other takeaway from how I see things playing out over the next few years is that the Australian people, because we are so completely apathetic in this country, because we are so lackadaisical, because we are actually quite naive, we have basically never been through a collective rite of passage. And this is a collective journey that we are going to be pushed into and to go through in this decade. It's very complicated to say what this means in this video, and I'll speak about it at length in another video. But the collective soul of Australia, the egregore, is basically still in a very childlike, naive, immature way of being. And because we are experiencing this global paradigm shift, then we are actually going to have to go through this rite of passage, which is the best way that it can be described, the transition from childhood to adulthood, or from adolescence to adulthood. We are still at the state of adolescence, or we haven't made that collective transformation yet. And if you look back through our history, we have basically always been subservient to various masters, whether it's been the British Empire, the Union Jack is still on our flag, whether it's been the US influence, the Anglo-American Empire, particularly with the US influence after World War II. I'm not suggesting we shouldn't have political and alliances and trading partners and all this sort of thing, but it's more the state of consciousness that we have this meekness, that there is a certain willful ignorance, that there is a certain inability to actually discern things for how they are, and deeper than that, to want to discern things, to want to know the truth, to want to understand what facts are, to push aside the propaganda in the media, to push aside the social engineering, the indoctrination. And it's not just related to the events of the last few years, it's related to our principles of us individually, that we stay silent when we know that all this wrongdoing is going on. And we have this tendency here in Australia, because we don't want to rock the boat. Don't seem to be making a fuss. We don't want to. Well, that is having a big price on our lifestyle, on our health and well-being, and our legacy for future generations. And because we have been so unwilling to actually be heard, to actually make a personal contribution to the collective as part of our legacy, we still only look at our legacy largely as in material terms, and in terms of the limited scope of family, rather than what we stood for, the principles of our being. And so this means that we are basically going to go through a very, very challenging time collectively. It doesn't mean everyone will have the same test individually, because some people are grown up actually. Some people have been through this rite of passage. But in order to go through this genuine transformation into the new paradigm, it can't be avoided, and it can't be avoided for the collective. So things will get increasingly more difficult in terms of our overall daily challenges here in Australia, particularly in regard to the economy, because we need to start to put that aspect of our being in context, that the material part of our being is important. Material consumer things, it's important to our way of living, but it's not the only thing. The same as sports, TV, all these leisure activities. It's quite a hedonistic society here in Australia. And we're missing the more elevated principles, which will come when we go through this rite of passage, when we make this transformation collectively, which is why the events this decade have we set up the way they are, because this can no longer be postponed. I mean, we're not suffering in the same way as people like in Argentina who have 100% inflation, but there are different qualities that we need to develop, and to start to see things for how they are, to start to actually become productive member of society that's not only economic, but is from a state of values that are not negotiable, that we won't be coerced by corporations, our minds not manipulated by the media, these sorts of things, that we have intrinsic values which we will not compromise, that we stand for something, these are the types of things that I'm referring to with this rite of passage. It's a big topic, but you get the point. So Paradigm Shift Summit is going ahead 17th to 19th of June at Mantra Mooloolaba on the Sunshine Coast. Tickets are selling quickly. We've got a fantastic program that's coming together. There's still more announcements to be made, so stay tuned for that. Thanks for watching. We live in epic times.